Hey, this is Chris for JamPlay.com. Welcome back to Beginner Guitar. We are in our third instantiation of this course. We started out with 10 weeks, 10 weeks of flyover. We learned basic chords. We had you playing along with basic tracks right away, and we haven't changed anything in terms of that, direction with this course. We always want to play over real music when we're learning new things. And the last group of 6 was really focused on chords. This time we're going to really focus on basic scale positions. And you know, what I was playing there was one scale position over the backing track we're gonna use tonight. And you may be thinking, man, I haven't been playing that long, maybe less than 6 months in some cases. Maybe you're a perpetual beginner, and that still looked difficult. Well, it's really not. And the first thing that you want to start really thinking about when you start learning scale positions is that any kind of guitar player can utilize scale positions. Any kind. Whether it's, obviously advanced players who are playing up and down and soloing everywhere, but even as beginners, you can hone in on small sections of the scale and really make some good music with them. So the bottom line is, though, with these next 3 weeks, or 6 weeks, you're gonna get the tools to be able to start improvising. The scale is the mechanism, and your ear is really the driving force behind the improvising, behind creating things sort of on the fly. Each week, we're gonna have a different track that's gonna support a different scale. We're not necessarily trying to learn, all the G major positions all up and down the neck. We're not trying to do that at all. We're trying to create a sort of a beginner's flyover view of different scale sounds in different areas of the neck, and then giving you contexts that beyond a shadow of a doubt you're going to be able to apply what you're learning. So that's where we're at with this. I do want to open up, since it's been a while, and we worked on the chords, we worked on the general flyover before that. Are there any initial questions going into this? It doesn't have to be about scales because we haven't covered those yet, but how's everybody doing? It's been a little bit of a break. Did the stuff that we worked on in the previous 6 weeks sink in? How's it going? Do you have any questions about that? Do you have any comments about it?
I have a question.
Yes?
If anyone here has not watched the other courses, is it going to be a problem for them? Or are they ready just to jump in with this?
If you have not played the guitar at all, yeah, you're going to want to go back and watch the archive of the first 10-week course, and you're going to want to take that week by week, and then maybe watch this one on archive. It doesn't hurt to hang out, but if you're a bare bones beginner, Guitar 103 or 101 Part 3, whatever it's called these days, is not necessarily for you. If you caught the first 10 weeks, but you didn't catch the second 6 weeks on chords, you probably can still hang with what we're doing right here. The next 6-week course after this one is going to be bringing chords and scales together. And so before the next 6 weeks, you're going to want to have watched everything. But for right now, if you're either not a beginner, you are a beginner, but not a bare bones beginner, like you've never played a D chord, or you've never experimented with playing around the neck at all. If you're not one of those bare bones beginners and you haven't viewed all the other lessons, you're probably fine. But if you are a bare bones beginner, you are going to want to go back and look at those first initial archives.
And there are not any other questions so far.
Okay.
Let us know if you have any, guys. That's why we are here.
We'll just wait like this for another 20 minutes or so, just like this.
Well, we can talk about the perils of fracking, if anyone would prefer.
Why do we always get... When Jeff directs one, he always wants to talk about fracking, and I don't know. It's not for me. Okay. This may very well be your first non-open position scale pattern that you will have learned. We worked on, in the first 10 weeks, we touched on the open position C, and we touched on part of the open position G, because we learned it in a song. Now we're going to get out of open position, and we're going to look at playing in position. So this first instantiation of these next 6 weeks, we're going to be talking a little bit more about scale playing technique, playing in position, what your hands are doing, much like we did with bar chords. And then we're going to get into learning the scale, and then we're going to get into applying it on a very basic level over the backing track. So you witnessed a lot of playing with the thumb over the neck, with the thumb behind the neck. We've talked about thumb position and wrist position in terms of bar chords and regular chords. Let's talk about it in terms of scales. With this scale position that we're using, it's and a lot of them that we're going to be working on, they're generalized to a 4-fret group. In this case, we're going to be off of the second position, based off of the 2nd fret, and each finger is going to be assigned a fret. Now, when you're improvising using a scale, the fingering doesn't matter so much. With what we're doing here, we want to sort of think about our fingering like this. If we've got a general 4-fret grouping, each finger is assigned to a fret. If there is, let's say, a note that occurs 1 fret down here, your first finger handles it. If there's a note that occurs on this fret, your 4th finger handles it. But the 2 middle ones are always going to, they're sort of your anchors. They're always going to be right here. So we're in the 2nd position. That would be true also if we were playing up here and we want to play a scale here. If we have a note that hangs out here, your 1st finger would cover it. If we have a note that hangs out 1 fret higher, your 4th finger would cover it. So that is sort of the idea of position playing. That is going to drive our thumb position. If we go down here again and we look at my thumb, let's see. Yeah. That's all right. They can still see the thumb. Now, watch what happens when I move my thumb up. You can't really see it from this angle as much, but this is the ideal thumb pattern or thumb position. Very similar to what it would be like for bar chords. Look at that. The only difference is my thumb is backing up my 2 anchor fingers instead of more on my 1st finger. Okay, so I have this nifty little bar right here on my neck to sort of be a guide for that. But the general rule is the joint of your thumb right here, right there, is going to be on the hump or the highest part of the neck. See? Okay, let's go back to the main view. Actually, let's go back to this view. No, just kidding. Okay, so if you're looking at my fretting hand now from this point of view, watch what happens if I raise my thumb and I play like this. Wow, I have really shortened my fingers, right? Like this, I have all this play, I have all this range, to stretch. If I do this, and a lot of players will play like this, and this is not a bad reason, it's not a bad way to play. We've covered stuff where this makes sense. You're playing open position, you don't need quite the range. Maybe you're doing a lot of string muting, and you need to be able to mute stuff. Your thumb can work with that. Maybe you're doing maybe you're playing in your pentatonic box, and you don't need that much range, although I would argue you probably still do. But a lot of people get in the habit of playing with their thumb over the neck, and then when they try to start playing scale positions, it looks and feels really awkward. They have to sort of move like that, and they're limited because of their hand position. For this course, we want it to look like this. When we're playing the scale positions in the next 6 weeks, you want that thumb firmly behind, not over, and you want to think about this 4-fret grouping. That's going to give you, if you want to warm up, this isn't in the tab, but if you want to warm up with feeling what this feels like without having to think about a position, just play 4 frets at a time all the way up the strings. Do it at any tempo. It's just to sort of get the idea going that you're playing in position. down. Now I'd like you to observe what my thumb is doing again here, so I'm going to switch over so that we can get that view. I'm going to do that same thing again. I want you to look at what my thumb does and how it backs up the entire... I'll play up here so you can see. And notice the joint of the thumb is on the hump of the neck. Now watch. As I move down, it stays put a little bit, but then it comes down. So the joint is no longer there. It's fluid, but it supports where my fingers are. Watch the thumb again. See how that looks or how that works? It's not the same as bar chords where you're trying to get, you're trying to get a lot of force behind it. You're reinforcing what you're doing, the range that you're choosing to play on the guitar. And it's going to change when you're down here a little bit. It might do that since your hand is further down the neck. But really, thumb position is so important. Hand position, wrist position, all those things. Let's go back to the main view now. Check out what I'm doing with my my elbow down here at second position still. Notice I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this. It's a very natural, everything's sort of falling into place. And we've talked about this before, and I mentioned how important this was going to be of playing with a footstool if you're going to sit down and practicing with your guitar, if you're right-handed anyway, on your left knee. The reason I like to do this is because it allows everything when you're practicing to sort of be aligned. This is okay, to practice like this. That's fine, but just realize, look at what this does to my arm. It's not terribly awkward when you are used to playing guitar, but it does put your wrist in a slightly different and more awkward position than when like this. It's much more open. Nothing's doing this. Not to mention, when you're like this, this is a very different feel and position than when you're standing up. Whereas when we're like this, if I stand up, the guitar is basically in the same position. Maybe a little bit lower because my strap wouldn't be quite this high. But all these things that we've talked about in terms of posture really come into play, really with everything. But you really start to see where they come into play, particularly when you start getting around the neck a little bit more and playing single notes. Are there any questions about positioning with this hand before we talk about this hand? If they're not, I don't know.
Yeah, there's no questions right now. I've been asking people if they have any, but I'm guessing they're all with their guitar in their hands. So keep in mind,
type.
Since I'm guessing there's some people here who are new to the events, if you have a question related exactly to what Chris is talking about, so in this case, holding the guitar, yada, yada, we'll ask that question right away, so you don't have to hold off on it. If you have a more general question, we will wait until the end of the session for that.
For sure. Okay, let's talk about the picking hand a little bit, because we've gone way beyond simply just doing this. There's a lot going on over here. So, what I'm going to do is we're going to forget about this hand for just a second, and we're going to just pick on the string. We're going to start with the low E string. We're just going to practice very light alternate picking. And we've talked about how to hold the pick in terms of chords. Let's also address it in terms of picking. You remember, and it's not really that it's different, it's just maybe a little different. I mentioned for you to do this. There's that whole idea that we talked about before. And then you sort of loosen up. Everything loosens up. And so when you're strumming, you've got that sort of look. When you pick, you choke up a little bit more. You don't have to move the pick in your fingers, but it's sort of that idea. In other words, you're not reshuffling to do a different position. You shouldn't have to do this, but you can have sort of one position. And as long as you're relaxed, you're not doing that, kind of like this. And there's, nothing is really wrong. I'm just giving you ways to think about things that will help you get started well and easily. But you might see guitar players out there that do this or that do this and play amazingly well. it works for them. But if you want to know what has worked for me and what generally works for people wanting to get started with picking and alternate picking, which is what we're going to be doing, you want to be relaxed. You want to have one picking position that works for strumming that you can modify and sort of not tighten up, but focus in a little bit more. See that? Strumming like this. Picking on the A string.
Are you open for a question about your pick right now?
Yeah.
Okay, I know you've had this question before. I answer it with whatever depth you think appropriate, but Francis was wondering, does pick thickness matter for what you're talking about?
Yeah, for alternate picking, when you start doing scales, I don't like really light picks. For strumming, I can handle, a light or a medium pick if I know I'm not going to be doing some detailed scale work or anything. For actual scales, I prefer picks that don't bend. And this one, I suppose that anything bends if you squeeze hard enough, but in the context of hitting the string, it stays rigid. So I prefer a rigid pick when I'm practicing my scales. For strumming, for electric guitar, I almost always use these, which are thick and they're rigid against the strings. For acoustic guitars, I use usually a medium, and I'm okay if I'm going to be picking a lot of single scales and stuff like that. A medium. It's got a little give, but a little bit of rigidity. For the acoustic, I don't mind it so much. But when I'm practicing scales on an electric, I definitely prefer a rigid pick. So, that said, you certainly can do things. Nothing's wrong, but I find particularly with some of the floppy picks when you're trying to start with your picking, it can get very confusing, and it's kind of like bad posture. Why am I having trouble being accurate? Well, your pick's too floppy. That could be one of the reasons. So going back to this. We don't want to overanalyze too much because we don't want to tighten up, but I'm also picking, I'm not directly parallel to the string like that. There's a little bit of an angle. You don't want too much of an angle, but it's okay to have a little angle. It's also okay to be like that. The main thing is you want to be loose, you want to be aligned, and you want to make sure that you're not doing any, you're not using your shoulder too much while you're picking. And I'm not even talking about fast picking right now. You want to watch me in full view here, play through our one note exercise or our 4 fret sort of thing. Notice it's all very, I'm not doing this. I'm not way down like this. You've seen people play like this, but that's not how we're going to be aligned and relaxed. Also notice how my hand moves down. That's obvious, right? Because I am picking on these strings and on these strings. Everything sort of has to move. But I'm not really firmly anchoring anywhere, giving my hand, or up here, I'm not anchoring with my arm up here either. I'm giving my hand permission to sort of glide, and this part of my hand is resting on the strings this direction of the ones I'm not playing. That prevents a lot of extra string noise as I move around. Getting a natural down-up sort of motion. Again, it doesn't have to be fast. It's going to be really slow right now. And it should be. When you're working with your fingers on this side too, you want to sort of leave. You don't want to be doing this. Picking up all your fingers all the time. You want to leave things in position. That allows for a nice seamless sustain as you're alternate picking through a passage.
Hey Chris, I think you just talked about this, but just in case, Roger Funk was asking, when you're with your floating hand, where do you place your hand while you're picking?
So you want to place it just this way of the bridge, like that, so that this part of your hand is sort of scraping against the strings. That allows for things to mute, allows for this hand to be a part of muting and deadening the strings that are lower than the string you're playing. So if I'm playing a note on this string, like this, my picking hand is deadening the ones below. Now you might ask, what's deadening the strings above? Don't worry about that. Don't hone in on that much right now, but it really is mostly your left hand. Your left hand provides those mutes. And so if you're looking at it from this perspective, notice the angle of my first finger. If I'm playing a note here, I've got that being deadened by this hand, and then playing that note, and then I've got this finger is muting everything that's closer to the floor, your higher strings. This takes a lot of practice, and learning this scale is going to help you do it. It's not like you can learn this without just practicing a lot. Learning a scale, getting a feel for it, you sort of know what to look out for. You know the correct hand position. Now it's a matter of really micro-adjusting as you practice this first scale. It's a matter of really micro-adjusting your own hands, your own body, and getting the sounds you can by fitting within these recommendations. That's really, really going to help you out. So, we've talked about muting, we've talked about hand position, both hands. We've talked about overall guitar position, we've talked about what it means to play in position, we've talked about thumb. Now it's time to look at the scale. Before we do anything, let's look at the tab. We're not going to play, we're just going to look at the tab. I said that this was the second position G major scale, and of course that's reflected in the title. It starts on the G, on the 3rd fret, low E. When we look at this, we want to sort of just take in what our hands might be doing before we actually go to play. Got 2 notes, 3/5 on the low E. Then we have 3 notes on the 5th, 4th, and 3rd strings. Then 2 notes again on the 2nd, and 3 notes. Well, 5 notes if you consider the down. Okay, so strings 6 and 2, your low E and your B string, have just 2 notes on them in this position. Do we have, so we know we're in the second position, do we have any 2s? Yes, of course. Do we have any 1s? Are we going to be doing this at all? No. Do we have any 6s? No. So we're firmly planted within this 4-fret grouping. That's cool. That's going to make this nice. Okay, so very, very slowly, and this is all the things technique-wise that I just explained are going to start. I'm just going to do them because I've been doing them for a long time. When you do this for the first time, you may not. And so you need to take things slow enough to where you're playing cleanly, you're taking a lot of these things into consideration. Here it is. I'm going to call out the fret numbers as I play. 3, 5. And I'm playing slow enough that I'm not going to use alternate picking. And as you're learning, you may not want to use alternate picking right away either. You may just want to get the notes, play all downstrokes, focus on getting each note clean. That's totally fine. In fact, you should start there if you're not to the point where you can alternate pick. Start playing cleanly wherever you're at and push yourself little by little. 3, 5, 2, 3, 5, 2, 4, 5, 2, 4, 5, 3, 5, 2, 3. So we've got a total of 2 octaves now. We're going to go up one more. 5, 3, 2, 5, 3, 5, 4, 2, 5, 4, 2, 5, 3, 2, 5, 3, 2, 3. So we've covered all the notes in the G major scale in this position. We've done so in the 4-fret grouping, We've played all the way up and down. Let's look for some patterns that'll help us learn and remember this. 3, 5, if we look at these first two, the 6th and the 5th string, we've got 3, 5, 2, 3, 5. So we have 2 3 5s with a 2 in there. Okay, so you can see that pattern, right? You're adding a 2, but you've got these 2 notes and these 2 notes. Then the next 2 strings are the same. We've got 2 4 5, 2 4 5. So 3 5 2 3 5, 2 4 5, 2 4 5. You can make anything musical, and this will help you remember the scale. And then we've also got 3 5 2 3 5 again, if we're looking on the way up. So we've got 3 5 2 3 5, 2 4 5, 2 4 5, 3 5 2 3 5. And you could even play it like that right off with that little rhythm, and it would sound kind of neat. Kind of cool sounding. You don't have to, of course, but this is a way to help you remember. 3 5 2 3 5, 2 4 5, 2 4 5, 3 5 2 3 5. And that gets you all the way up the scale. Memory aids like that for me when I first started playing were really, really helpful. And this was actually I think this was the first scale position that I learned. I learned it even before the open position stuff. Which is weird because the open position stuff is a little easier to play. Looking on the way down, you can reverse the patterns and that'll kind of work itself out. You want to practice up and down to a tempo of your choosing. But right away, you don't even want to practice to a tempo at all. It says 120 on there. It doesn't matter at all. I mean, completely ignore that. Whatever is going to help you learn and be comfortable playing. I'm going to play this a couple more times slowly, but I'm going to introduce alternate picking now. And I just want you to watch what my hand looks like, what my body language looks like, all that stuff, what my muting, how this hand's kind of going back and forth, what this is doing. Here we go. Not using very consistent alternate picking because, again, it's so slow at this point, which the slower you pick, the less important it becomes that you use alternate picking. Now, I'm going to speed up a little bit so you can see the mechanics work at a greater speed. See the position playing really. Okay. Now, learning the whole pattern, learning the whole position, being able to play it like that is great and very important. What a lot of students end up struggling with is that they can play it at a moderately slow tempo and play it cleanly, but when it comes to playing with any real music, they tend to treat all these notes as though they should exist together in that order all the time. But that's not necessarily, that doesn't have to be the case. And in terms of tempo, we want to get into our minds already that when we're practicing these scales over real music, we want to phrase with them right out of the gate, even before you're really that comfortable with the scale. This is very important. Even before you can actually play the whole thing, you know, at the tempo that I just played it, even if you're playing really slow, you're looking at the tab and you're focusing on all these things, you know, your thumb position, your wrist here to make sure you don't have any dead strings. Put on the track. Put on the track and do this. Track's kind of a high tempo. You don't have to do this. You don't have to do that. You can play as slow as you want. This track is in the key of G. It's a chord progression in the key of G. And by you playing very slow, you're going to start learning, ooh, you know, this note sounds really good over the G. This note sounds good over the next chord, you know, whatever it is. You're automatically musicifying this pattern. Let's see what that looks like from a very beginner level. Working your way up the scale. We're doing it in order for now. Didn't really plan that, but that sounds neat. That sounds great too. All that sounds kind of neat. We're just taking the scale all the way down. Might not be your first choice in terms of landing on those particular chords. That doesn't sound good at all. That one does. So see how slow I'm going? I'm being musical with the scale, and you can, once you get it out of this idea that you just have to sit here and woodshed it, which is also good. Doing that is going to help you, but I think people tend to get discouraged when they think that they have to have it up to a certain speed or a certain comfort level before they take it to real music. I don't think that at all. The other thing you can do is break down the scale into little parts. And these little parts are going to help you be more musical as well. You can focus on just a few notes like this. Pull the tab up again. So you're playing up the scale. Focused on these two strings, 2, 4, 5, 2, 5, 2, 4, 5, 2, 4, 5. And didn't necessarily play them in order. Already. Maybe go up to the next set of strings. So we're playing slow. We're taking parts of scales, and there's books and books and books of patterns, you know. There's stuff like that you can learn, and those are great coordination exercises. And I recommend you learning those, and they're going to help you with some of the things that you see me playing sort of off the cuff. But at the same time, we don't want to get ahead of ourselves. You don't have to learn a lot to be able to do a lot. We can take this scale and we can practice at a very slow tempo over real music and become way more comfortable with it way more quickly and let the technique follow rather than really focusing on, and this is the main thing I see beginner guitarists get screwed up over. They focus too much on the mechanics and not as much on the music. We want to focus a lot on the music and let the technique follow. Because the technique is going to feel more natural, it's going to follow more naturally when you are able to be musical right away. I think technique always follows music. Break for questions, and then I'm going to demonstrate practicing this a little bit more.
Okay, guys. We got quite a few questions here, so I'm going to ask the few that are the most related first, just to make sure we get those out of the way. Tracy114E asks, I've been having trouble getting my pick stuck on a string when alternate picking, but I noticed that you are not attacking the string at a 90-degree angle. Can you describe or show the picking action closer?
Yep. Yeah, we covered this a little earlier. That's pretty key. So, yeah, I'm not doing this. And I can see why. And a lot of the reason people get their pick stuck is, number one, they might be holding it too tightly. You know, and that sort of thing happens. I'm holding it extremely loose. You know, if I go and touch it, a lot of play. Play's coming from my fingers. So I'm holding it extremely loose. And I'm not doing this, but I'm also not doing this. It's a very natural, sort of aligned. This allows for less rigidity. The pick can almost sort of glide off the corner like this instead of the whole thing. I'm using less pick. And if I do it real slow, that sort of thing happens rather than this. This is a much more like cold break, right? Versus So, and the main thing is those that you're staying loose. That's going to help your pick not get stuck for sure. Good question.
Okay, that gentleman earlier, Roger Funk, who had asked a question about your hand floating, he actually had meant that he had a floating bridge and his hand keeps coming down at a weird angle. The bridge is in the way. Is there any way he can fix that?
Well, maybe, what kind of guitar is it? Some guitars, like the scale, is shorter, and so that the bridge is a little bit further up this way. On Ibanez and in the like Jacksons and stuff, it's a little bit further back, so you actually have more room. It really is. If the bridge is getting in the way, without seeing what you're doing, it'd be really helpful if I could see a picture of what you were doing, because I could probably instruct you better. But it really is about finding the place on your guitar, wherever it may be, that's right this way of the bridge. Right here. Unless you're specifically doing palm muting, you want to be up here so that you can get things deadened like that. And if you feel like that isn't natural with the rest of what's going on here, you might need to, adjust it this way a little, maybe adjust it this way a little, and figure out where that is so that you can have this sort of natural, your hand just kind of falls there.
Okay. This is a quick and easy one. Gary Burges, however you say it, says, which foot is on the footstool?
My guitar is on my left knee, and I'm right-handed, and my left foot is on the footstool. So that allows me to play like this. Some people do use footstools on the other leg, and they play like this. And that brings the guitar up a little bit more. But you still have those ergonomic issues over time, and the differences between sitting and standing. So I put it like this. This is what some people would consider classical or traditional sort of position, but I've been practicing like this for a long time, and this it's just the way it feels best to me because of the way your hands just kind of fall on the guitar.
Okay. Guitar Kids Are Cool says, for the acoustic guitar, does your hand change if you are a lefty with a left-handed guitar? So basically...
No, it should look exactly... All these things apply to a lefty. It's just everything's going to be reversed. You wouldn't want your left foot raised up. You'd want your right foot raised up. It would just look like this. And then your hand, of course, this is, the cable's in the way and everything, so that's going to look a little different. But this guitar is a horrible guitar to demonstrate this with because of this. But some of them don't have that issue. And of course, if you're a real lefty, then your cable's going to be down here and it wouldn't be an issue.
Okay, and then for the fretting hand, it's all pretty much the same thing, just flipped, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No difference in technique at all between lefties and righties.
Perfect. Okay, so the last question we have logged right now is Nickel Fretney's asking, should I learn the diatonics before pentatonics or vice versa?
Well, we're doing kind of a flyover. We're going to learn some diatonics. We're going to learn some pentatonics over the next 6 weeks. I don't know that you'd necessarily want to learn one before the other. The pentatonic scales are really easy to play, and we're going to work on some of those. I think that it doesn't matter. Like, I learned the diatonics first. Just that's how my teacher taught me, and it seemed neat. And then I think I like it. It introduced me to more notes, which I think when I learned the pentatonics, it was a matter of subtracting notes, which I think in some ways musically that helped me a little bit. But what we're doing in this course is we're going to learn sort of a little bit of both at the same time, during the next 6 weeks. So we're not, like I said, we're not going to focus on all the diatonic G positions or all the, the 5 basic pentatonic. We're not doing that in this course anyway. We're gonna do a little bit of a flyover. So I think I really liked learning the diatonics first, but I know a lot of people who learn the pentatonics first, and that's great too. It gets you playing, particularly the blues, rock stuff much, very quickly.
Okay.
Good question.
And yeah, that's all the questions we have for right now.
Okay. If there are any more, please let me know. I'm going to now just let the track roll. I should mention that these tracks are designed to be loops. So if you're using a program like Transcribe, which I've recommended before, you load it in, it'll just sort of play forever. And it's designed to loop. If you're just listening to it in QuickTime or Windows Media Player or something like that, it's going to have this awkward sort of hard stop at the end because it's designed to be a loop. So I strongly recommend you find a program. Transcribe is cheap. There are other programs that let you sort of loop things. Audacity is a free one on your computer that you can set up that sort of thing. And it's just very helpful because you don't have to worry about, hit and play or stop a bunch of times. So here we go. Just gonna get into it. I'm gonna play only this position. Yes.
Do you want the tab or the regular view?
Tab would be fine. Assigning different rhythms that you just sort of make up in your head is kind of neat. I'm longer on some notes. Mixing up the notes. Once you get more comfortable. can go on for as long as your hands and ears can take it. So let's talk a little bit about the guided practice. The guided practice is what I'm demonstrating here. And I give you blocks. I give you a 15-minute block per scale. And it's sort of the same way throughout the whole course. And really, if you have this thing set up to loop, 15 minutes, that can go by fast or slow. But I really want you to dive in. 15 minutes in the grand scheme of practicing guitar is not that much. But you're going to find that, I get a lot of questions about practicing, like, how much should you practice? If you did 15 minutes on this scale every day for a week, and you let the thing loop and you really did play just like I was playing for 15 minutes a day, you're going to improve dramatically. 15 minutes a day doesn't sound like a lot. A lot of people say, oh, at least 30 minutes a day or whatever. But a lot of people waste time. Their 30 minutes might be watching a YouTube video and then, checking out a few related YouTube videos and then practicing this, 1 or 2 times through maybe. And then learning some tab and then watching another YouTube video and then you played guitar. But what I want to try to do with these guided practice sessions, like we have this whole time, but particularly with these next 6 weeks, these are very specific directives in terms of practice. And so it's very possible for you to do what I just demonstrated for 15 minutes and do it every day on this one scale. And you're really, all these things that I've shared, you're really going to improve upon them. You're really going to figure things out. So I encourage you to do that. Really try it. It's going to be painful the first couple times. But after a little bit, it's going to be really fun, and you're going to notice a dramatic improvement. If you've never played scales before, you can still play with this track. You can have the tab out just like I was doing in the beginning, and just move extremely slow. Extremely slow. Following along with the tab, playing in rhythm to the track, 15 minutes a day. You can do it. And I'd love to hear how things work for you. As we progress over the next 6 weeks, you're going to have multiple scales to practice. What I'd like you to do is the scale that we're working on with the track that we're working on that week, I'd like you to commit to doing that one 15 minutes a day. The rest of them you can circle back around, sort of at random. What you'll find is that as we get closer to the end of the 6 weeks, if you really are putting in the time, is that week 7 and 8, when we're not meeting, you're going to be able to sort of pull these different tracks up and practice these different scales, and things are going to keep getting more musical, more comfortable. It's going to be really fun, and you're going to be amazed that at the end of 6 to 8 weeks that you can play the types of things that you're playing and sound as musical as you do.
I hate to break it to you, but we have some questions, and they're about to get all up in your grill.
Good, let's do it.
Okay, so the first one, you remember the Roger Funk guy who was talking about the floating bridge. Mm-hmm. I don't know if this will help you or not. He doesn't have a picture of it, but he says he has it's an Ibanez locking. It's a locking bridge. Wait, what did he say? Ibanez locking nut.
Yeah, I've got one of those.
And he says the problem is that, if he moves his hand up, he's really close to the fretboard, and it has the adjusting nuts on the bridge, which makes it hard for him to go down the other direction.
Well, but what you're describing, because I've got a couple of those guitars, what you're describing is that you're either like here or hitting the locking things. But there's plenty of middle ground on those guitars. In fact, there's more than on those than there is on this particular one. Yeah, those things can get in the way, but it's that sweet spot. It'd be like if I'm playing here, yeah, the bridge, it does sort of get in the way. You don't want to be over the physical bridge. You want to be on the strings in front of the bridge. And I know those guitars give you plenty of room to do that without getting too close to up here. You don't want to be doing that. But there's this range. This nice range between really right here that's perfectly acceptable.
My guess is there's not much to it aside from trial and error.
Yeah, it is, and experimenting with that range. But yeah, you don't want to be on the bridge because those things will get in the way for sure.
Okay, here comes a question from Brian Crowder. Do we need to know the terminology, diatonic, pentatonic, or music theory, or just focus on the pattern?
No, I was using that stuff, those terminologies, because there was a question directed at me that used those terms. For what we're learning here, you don't need to know any of that. You know that for this week you're learning the G major second position scale, and you're going to play with it over a G major backing track. That's it. And there's going to be some other things that you'll learn along the way, because I'll tell you the names of the scales. I'll tell you, if there are any gotchas, if there are position problems. But really, you only need to know, in order to get the most out of these lessons, you only need to know what I'm telling you in that particular lesson. Good question.
Okay, this relates. Mycroft says, "What are diatonics and pentatonics? What does that mean?"
It's a little out of the scope of what we're talking about. But a diatonic, the word diatonic really means that you're playing notes that are in one particular major key, and there are 7 of them. So if we choose an A, we're playing a diatonic scale in A. We're playing only notes that work in A, and those happen to be 7 notes. So we're taking this G major scale, we're bringing it, let's go to G since we've been working there. This is a diatonic scale. It's a 7-note scale, and all the notes exist in the key of G. We're not doing that, for example. A pentatonic scale is a 5-note scale, not a 7-note scale. A 5-note scale that still exists within the confines of a certain root, a certain key. So in the case of, if we were to make this diatonic scale a pentatonic scale, we would be removing some of the notes. But that's way beyond the scope of what we're trying to do in this, and I don't want to open that rabbit hole. David Walleman has done, is it still going, the pentatonic mastery course, or is that done?
It just finished. Okay,
yeah, so that the pentatonic mastery gets in, and we're going to work on some pentatonic, and I'll explain that more later as we get into it. But yeah, pentatonic, 5 notes, based on the diatonic, really. You're just removing some notes. And diatonic is the full, within the key notes.
All right, we have another question from Greg GP. It's just about the course. Mm-hmm. He says, so will this course discuss soloing to changes, moving in and out of scales to fit a progression?
We are not going to discuss methods for that, but we will be doing that. We've already done that in this course today, in this session. And I tend to approach it, at least at this level of playing, as sort of a self-discovery sort of thing. As you're moving slowly with this diatonic scale, as you're moving slowly with this scale position in the key of G, and the chords change, you're going to notice for really no good reason, as far as you might know, that certain notes sound good over certain chords. You're welcome to figure out why. I'm playing a C note, and I just switched to a C chord. Oh, that makes sense. Or I'm playing a G note, and it still sounds great over a C chord. Well, yeah, because the C chord has a G in it. You're going to stumble across all sorts of those things, and while you're doing these drills, these practice drills, you're going to sort of naturally, your ear is going to guide you into soloing over these changes. But we're not, because we're sticking, at least for a while, we're sticking purely to the key of G in this next week. I want you to sort of discover those sorts of things. It gets way too complicated when we try to feed that much information. Well, we're going to stick in G, but over C you want to play this, and over D you want to play... It's all the G major scale, and that's really what we want you focusing on right now.
Brian Crowder is back, and he says, is Chris always progressing through the sequence in order, or is he replaying parts if it fits in with the music?
I am not... when I'm playing the scale to the music, I can play all the way through the sequence, all the way up and down, and then you should try that. But more importantly, you want to choose little parts of the scale once you've got the whole thing down. And you can play little parts that you feel like fit with the music and experiment with it. You're starting to improvise. If all you really want to use is those notes out of the scale, and you want to stick to those and experiment on how those fit over this track, that could be a great thing to practice as part of your 15 minutes. I'm just trying stuff. Some of it might sound good, some of it might not sound good at all. That doesn't sound very good. That's part of what you're doing. You're practicing with playing notes in different time, maybe limit yourself to a couple notes, come up with a little melody. The bottom line is you're experimenting with this scale position and only the scale position, maybe parts of it, maybe all of it, and you're getting familiar with how the notes sound over the track.
Okay, and actually another question from Brian. He says, why does the last part of the tab sequence on low E go 5-3-2-3 versus ending 5-3 on the G note instead of playing it twice?
Good question. This scale pattern, go to the tab for me real quick. Watch as I play it fast. I'm only playing it fast to show you what I'm about to talk about. Number one is for timing. Number two, this note is in the position. It's in G. It's an F sharp. It's the 7th of G. And it happens to be within this 4-fret grouping. So we also went all the way up to here instead of just stopping at G. If we just stopped at G, we'd be omitting two notes that work really well within the confines of G. So we go down to, and it's written in a particular order with a particular timing, because if you play it and count it, it works out to be sort of an even look. But the reason the number 2 is there on the low E is because it is part of the second position G major scale.
Okay, so let me just double check, but I'm pretty sure that's all of the questions that are 100% about the lesson. We do have 3 general ones that I'm seeing. They are all beginner questions, though, so I thought it might be good to go over them.
Cool.
Tracy114 says, it's a little off topic, but do you typically want to play over the pickup you are using, or does it not matter?
Oh, it doesn't matter at all.
Okay.
Be relaxed. Be in line with what's going on, and make sure you can pick cleanly. If that happens to be over a certain pickup that you're using, you don't want to target a pickup that you're using. Absolutely not. You want to be the pickup selector, and the pickup you're using is going to generate a different sound regardless of whether you're playing right over it or not. You can get different sounds by picking in different places, but right now we don't want to be focusing on that so much. We want to be focusing on being relaxed, holding the pick in a way that allows you to move through the scale in a fluid way.
Okay, we have a question from Guitar Kids Are Cool, and she wants to know if she should start on an electric or acoustic. He or she, I suppose, has already been playing for 1 month and has improved a lot on the acoustic guitar.
Ultimately it doesn't really matter which one you start on. I started on electric, and I recommend, if you don't already have a guitar and you're looking to get one, if you plan to play electric anyway, even a little bit, it's easier to start on electric because it's easier to play. Getting sound out of it, just playing one note or one chord, is much easier. And I started on acoustic initially, and I was young enough that I just didn't feel like I was able to make music on it very well. So when I picked up an electric and it was so easy to play, I was able to get going and make music a little quicker, and then picking up the acoustic wasn't so hard. That was my experience. But some people have no interest in an electric guitar ever, and so they just, the style of music that they want to play is acoustic, so they can do that. But if you're struggling with stuff like, hand pain and, not being able to not get string buzz and all that stuff, maybe your guitar's not set up correctly, but then again, maybe you just need to start with something that's a little bit more sort of user-friendly. And I definitely found as a beginner that the electric was more user-friendly, or beginner-friendly.
We just got the advice, start on a Les Paul, and you should probably get a chiropractor.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, one more question from Guitar Kids Are Cool. We're probably not going to take any more questions now, guys, unless they're about the lesson, just so we can get out of here at a reasonable time and keep this lesson around an hour. This is a pretty simple question. What is a slide? I really don't know it, but I have heard of them. That's why I asked.
A slide is a little thing that you put on your finger that allows, it resonates against the strings, eliminating the need for frets. And so it has, and I don't have one, otherwise I'd demonstrate, but it allows for a very sort of pitchy, fluid feel. But, YouTube it. Just YouTube slide guitars.
Can you maybe just show the slide technique just really quick, just in case?
I can't, because I don't have a slide.
No, with on the strings with your fingers. Slide.
I mean, yeah, it's just this.
Not the slide guitar, like a slide.
Oh. Oh, is that what she's talking
I
about?
don't know, but just if you can just show that really
Oh,
fast,
yeah.
and then if you want to learn more, you can look it up on JamPlay.
So slide guitar is the little glass finger thing. A slide technique is just you're fretting one note and then sliding up to a different fret, any amount of distance. Put the question up again. Did I misinterpret that? I thought she was specifically talking about what is a slide.
I
Yeah.
am not sure, but I figured it's best to be thorough.
Yeah. So there's two answers.
Vigorous and thorough.
Whichever one works.
All right. That looks like all the questions. We have not had any more come in about today's lesson.
Cool. All right. Well, cool, guys. Thank you so much for being a part of this. Thank you for all the great questions. Practice 15 minutes a day on this track with this position of scale. I look forward to taking you through the rest of this journey, this next 6 weeks on scales.